I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Jackson to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to public comments. This is time where citizens are encouraged to speak publicly. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make a comment? Yeah. Moving on to the discussion agenda, the letter of map revision project update.
The Commissioners Joe File with Benish is here to kind of present an update on where we're at with the project and what our next steps are.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Joe File. I'm with Benish, and we are the ones that are doing the letter of map revision for the city of Concordia. So just to give a little history, and I'll do this really quickly and then answer any questions that you have. But back in July of 2014, the maps that are effective now went into effect. And I'm fairly familiar with the history of this project, but I think at that time, Bruno and others had a lot of discussions with the state going into those maps that they didn't believe that the drainage way that comes through town was accurate. I think pushed back pretty hard with FEMA, but ultimately, partially because of funding constraints and other reasons, those maps went into effect. Over time, I think that the city has continued to express their concerns with the lack of accuracy of those maps. And in 2021, the state of Kansas was able to secure funds from FEMA to complete a technical assistance project for the city of Concordia. At that time, that project was completed, and I believe it was in 2023 that the city retained Benish to ultimately review that study and then move it forward as a letter of map revision, ultimately revising the maps. As we got into that project, and Benish was retained, as we got into that project, we determined that there were some issues with the modeling that had been done. There were actually some errors. So talking with Amy and Bruno, we decided to go back to the Department of Agriculture and have this discussion with them. They looked at it, they agreed with it. And so in an attempt to fix it, they went back to FEMA and secured additional funding to reason that we're where we are almost several months later that we don't have the LOMR submitted is because we went back to the state of Kansas and basically got more funding to update the mapping. That has been done, and as a result, what we are proposing to do is update the mapping, but also make a zone designation to the floodplain itself. So ultimately what that would do is change the map from a zone A special flood hazard area, which has a number of flood regulatory requirement, flood insurance regulatory requirements associated with it. One of those would be anybody that's in that area that has a federally backed mortgage is required to purchase flood insurance. We would change that zone to shaded zone X, average depth of less than 1 foot, which is a medium risk flood zone. And what that means is it does not carry that mandatory flood insurance purchase for federally backed mortgages. It also means that there is a lot more flexibility in terms of building requirements associated with that designation. It is there as an advisory floodplain. It does still carry some level of risk, but the community has a lot of flexibility in terms of how you use that rather than that very rigid flood zone of a zone A. The reason we're able to do that is because when we restudied it, while there is a lot of shallow street flooding and there is some break overflows, the average depths of that floodplain are clearly less than 1 foot of depth. It's very shallow. It's mostly street flooding. There aren't channel flows. And because of that, we're able to make that designation. We've had some discussions, and ultimately Amy submitted a letter to FEMA. They've agreed that they've agreed with the approach of changing the designation. So now what we are getting ready to do is go ahead and prepare the letter of map revision. We still have to submit it. It does have to go through a review process. If they find something with the work that we've done, it is possible, it's not likely at all, but it is possible that something could change that could ultimately change that flood depth and push it back to greater than 1 foot. So at this point, this is not final. It's just the path that we're proceeding down we're fairly confident in what we've done. We're fairly confident in our modeling. We're pretty confident in our approach. But that said, I'm not sitting here today telling you this is finalized. I'm saying at this point, we're working towards that final submittal here within the next month and a half. And so with that said, I think the previous flood zone is on page 3 of a handout that was provided in your packet. The revised flood zone, which is shown in orange instead of blue, and that's typically how FEMA depicts these zones of shaded zone X, average depth of less than a foot. So we're actually using their symbology on your handouts. And that shows the new flood zone. You will see that there's an overflow area and there's a portion of this city to the east that didn't previously have a floodplain that we've identified that has some overflow. We've had some discussions about that. A lot of that is very shallow street flooding as well. There are some detention basins down in the lower end of that I think actually do collect some water at times. But I will tell you, a lot of it's gotten significantly smaller, but there are some new areas. But the end result is that the overall zone designation will have a lot more flexibility. And like I say, for owners, won't carry that insurance requirement. But that said, I think I would just open it up for any questions that you all have.
So the new areas that have been identified as a risk for flood zone, will they have that requirement to get flood insurance?
Absolutely not. And I say that as it's proposed right now, absolutely not. They are shaded zone X, average depth of less than 1 foot. That does not carry a mandatory flood insurance purchase requirement. It's simply an advisory floodplain. The only thing that the city could possibly get into where these advisory floodplains would become an issue is if you applied for federal funding for critical infrastructure, hospitals, police or fire, water treatment, wastewater treatment facilities, things like that. If you applied for federal funding and they were in these flood zones, then somehow you would have to address flood proofing associated with those structures, but only in the case where you're taking federal funding and only in the case of critical infrastructure. For commercial, industrial, residential, they're simply an advisory floodplain that the city can choose or not choose to put any additional requirements on. And that's purely based on your own local preferences. FEMA doesn't put any requirements on it.
Jeff, can you explain at what point in this process do we start doing the public hearings and inviting that?
Yeah, so we've talked about that a little bit, and originally we had intended about this time when we got these floodplains to develop to go out to the public and have these discussions, because the floodplains would be potentially impacting the public. We thought there would be residents coming out of the floodplain, but potentially there could be some coming into the floodplain. We felt like it was really important to have those discussions. At this point, because this mapping will essentially be beneficial to all residential homeowners, commercial, industrial owners, we felt like maybe it is best to wait and have those discussions once FEMA does their initial review of this. What's going to happen is we're going to submit it. They're going to have a few comments, and one of the comments they're going to have is a public notification. We may do that public notification in parallel, but our thought process has been to actually have a public meeting. Maybe that's a few hours where we just have walk-ins. We do letters, we let people come in and we just answer questions on an individual basis. We haven't talked about exactly what that would look like, but my recommendation is, maybe we start at 3:30 and go to 6:30, or maybe it's 4 and go to 7, but whatever you think works best for your community, where we can get some people before the 5 o'clock hour and we can get those that are after the 5 o'clock hour in terms of getting off work and answer questions on an individual basis. But right now, unless something changes, this will be a pretty favorable discussion to everyone involved, and it's really just going to be disseminating that information. So at this point, we are waiting a little longer than we had planned because we just want to make sure that we get through that first FEMA review without going to the public until we are certain that these flood zones will be adopted in this way that we're talking about. Other questions?
Where specifically on this map are the areas that are added? What areas of town? I mean, like, so the brown.
So, I mean, this is kind of what it looks like now. So this is a big wide area. I don't know the best way to do this. but
Yeah.
This is a big wide area through town, and this area is generally getting significantly smaller. But on
Right,
the next map, you're gonna see an area that breaks over, and there is some shallow flooding over kind of on the eastern portion. So that is all getting added, but again, it's getting added as that medium risk flood zone. And the difference between the hatching is actually analogous to the blue. The orange areas without the hatching is a 500-year or 0.2% chance floodplain. Your previous floodplains don't have that, but now FEMA requires that any floodplain map that gets submitted as part of a LOMR, a new mapping project, has a 500-year floodplain. Both the 500-year floodplain as well as the 1% chance or the 100-year average depth of less than a foot have the same effect. They're advisory floodplains and really only come into play as a requirement on federal funding for critical infrastructure. Otherwise, it's purely advisory, and it's again up to the city preference of any additional requirements you would make on that.
So with exhibit one, it's blue because that was the original mapping, but if it were to be done today, we would see a significant amount of orange hatching in that.
Well, it's blue because that represents on a map both before and today a 1% chance floodplain that's a special flood hazard area, the zone where you would have to purchase flood insurance if you have a federally backed mortgage. We're changing it to orange. I think the takeaway is the orange hatch is also a 1% chance floodplain, but it's not a special flood hazard area. It doesn't carry that insurance requirement because it's got an average depth of less than a foot. So FEMA requirements with that orange hatched area are the same as a 500-year floodplain, which is also orange on a map. So essentially, we're taking every piece of blue floodplain off your map and replacing it with orange. We're taking all the high-risk areas off and replacing it with medium advisory risk floodplains.
Except the stuff that remains blue in exhibit 2, which is the backup water. stuff.
Yeah, that's-
River, and we can't get rid of that.
And that's.
All the blue, I'm sorry, go ahead. All of the blue that is on the map is associated with the Republican River, and that backwater is kind of the one where the Republican River 1% chance floodplain backs up, and that certainly was not part of any previous study, so we're essentially just leaving on the map as it was, and this line that we've created is actually kind of the break line between what was driven by the tributary that comes through town and the backwater. So that does remain, anything in blue remains in that 1% chance floodplain on the Republican River, just as it always has.
Questions?
So I think next steps is we will put this package together. The city will have to sign the application package. Amy and I were talking about this. I think it's really up to you all whether that's an official commission action or whether Amy does that as a city manager, or sometimes communities have a floodplain administrator sign it. So we will be bringing that probably within 1 to 2 months for signature for that package. And I think, in terms of what action you do or don't take, I really think that's up to you all as to whether you would prefer to have an official action item on your agenda or not. FEMA certainly doesn't require.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on to the minutes of the March 6th, 2024 meeting.
Move to approve the minutes of the March 6, 2024 meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Jackson to approve. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed-
Aye.
Sorry, Marcia. And I would abstain. Motion passes. Moving on to appropriation ordinance number 5.
I move to approve appropriations ordinance number 5.
Second.
The move by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Wentz to approve appropriation ordinance number 5. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to acceptance of 20th Street Extension proposal.
Okay, commissioners, before we get started here, Brett, can you guys see if you can get Brett, AJ, and Jason Gordon, if they're on, to show up on this before we start, please?
While you're doing that, I would just say what Joe just presented to you is a huge monster win for the city, if you had any doubt in your mind whatsoever. Okay, yeah, holy
Battling.
smokes.
And it looks like Rex is on there too, so yeah, add Rex as well. All right, let's go. There you are.
Sorry, just getting some of my papers in order. So real quick, refresh where we're at. About a month ago, I was standing here in front of you. We had one public bid for this 20th Street entrance street improvement project. Again, this is the public street entrance that will serve the new car wash property. We had one bid. That bid seemed to be an excessive price, and so you guys voted to reject that bid. That set me in motion. I sent out a request for proposals to about a dozen companies locally here within the community and some non-locally. Some of the same ones we sent originally to, which turned out to be a great idea. We received back then 3 proposal costs that you can see as attached to the spreadsheet that I attached. We got the original proposal back from both Parga with their number unchanged from their original bid. We got a proposal from Carrie Stuka Construction, and then ultimately we got the low number proposal from BHS Construction at $104,000 and some change, which is not an insignificant amount less than the bid that you rejected about a month ago. So reminder, BHS Construction, they're joining us here tonight. They are the guys that are in charge of building the car wash as well too. So them being the low bidder for this, them doing that project kind of makes sense. They get to coordinate the work that way. They get to decide when they want to, tear up that entrance and build a new one. It kind of just makes sense, so to speak. So therefore, after meeting with Amy and Shane and talking all of these through, I have gone ahead and put together the letter of recommendation. So we would recommend that the commission would approve the proposal from BHS Constructions for $104,000, $317.95 with their proposed start date of July 1st with a proposed completion date of August 1st for you guys to approve or disapprove. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have regarding that, where we got to this point.
Questions, appreciate you going back out.
No problem. That was kind of a scary thing to do, to reject a bid, but we see that it made some sense in the long run like we thought it might. So we'll save the city some cost on those street improvements for sure. Upon your approval of this recommendation, Campbell and Johnson will put together the contract documents for you guys listening in from BHS. I will get in touch with you upon their approval and send you the contracts for you to sign. And then we'll coordinate that. Then I'll coordinate with them directly regarding the construction observation and making sure that it gets built the way it was designed and all the fun part of it, so to speak.
I make a motion to accept the proposal submitted by BHS Construction for $104,317.95 for the 20th Street extension.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, seconded by Commissioner Hash to approve or to accept the proposal submitted by BHS Construction for $104,317.95 for the 20th Street extension. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Again, for the BHS guys listening in, I will be in touch with you, with contract documentation, and then we'll just proceed accordingly. Then, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on with license agreement for use of right-of-way by BHS Construction.
Mayor Commissioners, you have in your packet a memo and then a copy of the license agreement that includes Exhibit A that shows the areas that are proposed to be used for temporary storage by BHS Construction while they're constructing on the site. The site is tight enough that the adjacent areas are a publicly owned alley and a publicly owned street, both undeveloped toward the eastern ends. So BHS has proposed a way to use those spaces in a way that would not deny access to the developed properties on the north side, which is helpful to everybody, but allows them to keep their equipment and their supplies close as they build out this project. So we would ask that you would approve this license agreement for private storage in a public right of way on a temporary basis with BHS Construction.
Move to authorize the mayor to sign the license agreement for private storage in a public right of way.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Wentz to authorize the mayor to sign the license agreement for private storage in a public right-of-way. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And then, guys, we'll get with you. We'll get this signed and over to you so you can sign it as well. So thank you very much.
Okay. Sounds good. Appreciate it. Anything else from us before we hop off? Questions from you guys as far as construction project or anything?
Good.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Moving on to the purchase of tasers.
So the Concordia Police Department started carrying tasers in 2011. They were started out with the X26s and then upgraded the X26Ps. Well, unfortunately, now the X26Ps are getting old enough and there's no parts available. So we reached out to Axon. That's the only one that really is certified to sell tasers in the United States for law enforcement use. And they came up with two options, either this Taser 7 or the Taser 10. The Taser 7, it has some advantages, but also a bunch of disadvantages where it carries two cartridges and the range is anywhere from 4 to 24 feet. And what you're ultimately trying to get on a taser is a good probe spread, so you get the shock, which eliminates their body from doing anything else. Where the Taser 10, you can actually go up to 43 feet, and it's a two-shot method where you shoot once, and then you can place the laser wherever and shoot again and get a good spread, which would lock that body up, and you can run up there and get them into custody in a timely manner and not actually get hurt or hurt the suspect any worse. The other thing is with these Taser 10s, they would work in conjunction with our body cams. When they come out of the holster, it would automatically turn on our body cam. If the body cam is not on, it should be on, but it works in conjunction with the body cam, so we would get all the footage of the deployment of the taser. So what I'm recommending is the Taser 10, that would come with 11 tasers, a 5-year warranty, and also would include the cartridges and the holster. The cost of the project overall is $54,625. And what I would like to do is pay that over the next 5 years and make payments of $10,925 out of my equipment replacement fund.
Is that typically how it's done, is over the span of 5 years, or is that?
Yeah, you can go to 10, but 5 is typically, but 5 is when the warranty runs out and everything else. And I'd hate to be making payments on something that we don't have warranty on, or we'll be able to replace it.
Also heard some disadvantages to the 7.
Yes.
And it sounds like the T10 is the direction that most law enforcement agencies are utilizing right now, especially because Axon's the only option now.
Yes, that is correct. And I didn't mention in here that that cost also includes a master instructor coming up here and certifying us on the TASER 10s.
And that just comes standard with like, 5, like, officers.
Mhm.
That's part of the.
Yeah, and it's so they would teach 5 officers and the 5 officers, up to 5 officers, and then they would come back and teach the rest of the department.
I move to approve the purchase of 11 TASER 10s from Axon Technologies for $54,625 with annual payments of $10,925 to be paid from the equipment reserve fund.
Second.
The moved by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Hutchinson to approve the purchase of 11 TASER 10s from Axon Technologies for $54,625 with annual payments of $10,925 to be paid from the Equipment Reserve Fund. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you, guys.
Moving on to the C-CLIP grant application authorization for pavement restoration.
Okay, so the engineer in our office has met with Shane here in the last couple of weeks to start thinking forward regarding projects and street projects and planning ahead for some of those. One of the ones that came up was Highway 81 running through town, and it's the one that's getting thousands of vehicles through it daily. You can drive up and down it, you see where the city's done their best to patch the potholes. If you've driven over the viaduct, you've noticed how rough it is coming in and out of town. If you've sitting in Dr. Wentz's waiting room and felt the semis inside of his building, then you know there's some pavement restoration that needs to be done on Highway 81. And so what you would be authorizing here tonight is a grant application that would go in as part of the C-CLIP program through KDOT. It's a cost share program with KDOT. So if KDOT were to select the city of Concordia for this application, which is like up to $1.5 million, the city would have a portion of this project that we would identify. Some of the things we'd like to do with this pavement restoration are the approaches to the viaduct. There's some lanes of the pavement coming in. If you come in the south end of town and you're heading north, the pavement's getting pretty beat up out there as well. And then maybe trying to repair some panels through town as well too, just to see, depending on the cost of materials and the time, just we'll spread it as far as we can up and down Highway 81 to restore some of that pavement. Just as a reminder, that pavement has been there since 95, 96, so it's getting 35 years old. And with little to no maintenance to it to this point, which is fantastic, but now it's time to start thinking about doing maintenance before you have to do a major tear out and repair type of thing. So this would be the first step of submitting an application under this program to KDOT to try to gain grant funds to do a pavement restoration project. Upon approval from KDOT, then we'll we'll work with the city to identify the specifics and turn that into a project then at that point in time. Questions? This is not unlike any other C-CLIP grant application you guys have approved for street restoration before.
I move to authorize the city manager to apply for the C-CLIP pavement restoration grant of $1,500,000 to update, no, is that right? Yeah, to update US 81.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Wentz to authorize the city manager to apply for the C-CLIP pavement restoration grant of $1,500,000 to update US 81. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. Amy will get with you on making sure we have everything in order. Shane with you, make sure everything got in order and get that sent in. Okay, thank you.
Moving on to reports, city manager's reports.
quite a few things to share with you tonight. First, attended the resource roundtable today that Kami Turner kind of organizes throughout the city. I try to get there about once a quarter and was able, following that meeting, it was very good to hear from everybody. Was able to visit with Althea Seacard from the senior center, so do have a follow-up a little bit on where they're at with things. They are just waiting on their dishwasher and sink area to the stainless steel assembly that requires some customization because of the way that their kitchen's set up. As soon as they have that piece of equipment installed, finish their license with KDHE, and then they can interview and hire a cook, and they can begin food service again. So they're very, very close to working on that. They are accepting applications through the end of the month for cooks as well as a director for the senior center. They are continuing their socialization activities. So everything from playing cards to pool, that kind of thing is happening right now. And they are still open Monday through Friday, 8 to 2. So if anybody wants to go there and just hang out with folks, they can still do that. Update on our housing project with the St. Joseph subdivision. Earthwork did reach a point where they had to stop until the demolition of 830 West 11th was completed. This week, we ran into additional asbestos, a small amount in that building. So ISI Environmental did come up from Wichita, remove that, and so that Brad Smith Construction could keep going with the demolition. He does plan to start peeling off the roof tomorrow. They got the interior completed today. And then the brick veneer will start to come down. We are ready for utilities work to begin at any time. I'm just waiting on those materials and that contractor to get mobilized and be ready to go. I did see some guys out there today looking at some different things, so I know they're getting very, very close. Continuing conversations with Prairieland Electric. Kirkyard is going back with his board to get their authorization here next week to see whether or not they can advance that rebate up front or if there's other options. And did visit a little bit with Jason about what would happen if we phase the project to see if that was a feasible possibility, so that could spread out the cash outlay from the city for the development. Risks that happen there. One of the main risks would be the cost of materials and labor going up over time, so ultimately costing more. So we're still exploring that option as well. Any questions on housing stuff so far, senior center? No. Brown Grand Theater boiler, we had some patches made to a segment of boiler pipe. The patches were about 6 and a 10-foot section. Another leak happened. Hoods came out to replace that 10-foot segment of pipe, and as they were preparing to put the pipe back in, noticed that the threads that they were connecting to where the flange goes was also rusted through, so we had to authorize an additional segment of pipe to be replaced. The boiler piping is in need of repair. We are getting an estimate to completely replace all the boiler piping so that it's good to go, but we're very focused on getting these repairs made because Saturday, the Brown Grant is hosting the Concordia's Got Talent auditions. Are any of you a part of that? No? Okay, just checking. So it sounds like a really fun event. And then Sunday, the Community Palm Sunday service is being held there as well. They're expecting about 300 people or so. So we wanted to make sure that we had heat in the facility. It was about 58 degrees in there yesterday. It was a little bit chilly. Do have plan B and C in our hip pocket if we do need it, but as of this afternoon, the boiler was repressurizing, so we'll know tomorrow morning if that's going to hold and be ready to receive people this weekend. So those repairs are taking place. We did partner with the Chamber of Commerce and K-State Research and Extension to offer a Cut the Clutter decluttering class. This is a class that the K-State Research and Extension program has offered free in other communities recently, and we thought it'd be a great precursor to what is being planned for the city's annual citywide cleanup. We're not quite ready to announce details on that project yet, but a good precursor. So the Cut the Clutter class is going to be held on April 3rd at 12:15 p.m. at the chamber offices. RSVP to make sure that there's plenty of seats. It is a free course open to the public. We do encourage, in the spirit of decluttering, for everyone to bring a brown bag lunch with items from your pantry and refrigerator that are in need of removal before they expire. So we'll keep them there. You can see in the back of the room here, we have a large stack of food accumulating. Our annual employee giving project is nearing completion. It'll conclude next week, and we are gathering food stuff again for the resource center. So our employees have really stepped up to the plate and are offering that. The pile may not be as large as last time, and that's because we're also accepting cash donations that Amber and Stacy usually graciously agree to then convert into perishable food items that we also make a donation to. So it works out really, really well for our staff. That's all that I have for you tonight. Any questions? Thank you.
Other staff reports? All right. Ashley? Okay.
I don't have anything.
Last week Russell brought us some brand new newspapers and I meant to bring it up when we did that and I didn't, with the new blade and color. So just wanted to say that's an exciting thing for our community to be able to continue to have the newspaper. So we can see all the things our kids do and grandkids and adults and all the things.
Christie?
This has probably taken place a long time ago that I care to admit, but I happened to drive by the cemetery and noticed that that fence has been removed. I assume that the city did that and that it wasn't the result of an accident or anything. But I think that's gonna make it a lot easier for mowing. And it makes so much sense in my opinion. So anyway, thanks.
Marcia, have any comments?
No. I don't have anything.
I'd like to voice my concern that I didn't receive a hand-delivered paper, but we'll talk about that later.
I believe you were out of town.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
Second.
So moved by Commissioner Hatch, second by Commissioner Jackson to adjourn the meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.